Mrs. Coleman, if you could please follow me to your seat. The wedding planner's voice was honeyed with fake politeness, her clipboard clutched against her chest like a shield. I smoothed down my navy blue dress, the one I'd spent 3 months searching for, the one William had once said brought out the silver in my hair, and followed her through the glittering reception hall of the Rosecliff Mansion in Newport. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting diamond-like reflections across the faces of 400 guests I mostly didn't recognize. Across the room, my son William stood tall in his tuxedo, his arm possessively around his new bride Veronica's waist as they greeted the Bennett family's social circle. He hadn't looked my way once since the ceremony. The wedding planner's heels clicked against the marble floor, past table after table of important guests, past the dance floor, past the string quartet. With each step, the knot in my stomach tightened. Finally, she stopped at a small round table partially hidden behind a large floral arrangement, directly beside the swinging doors that led to the kitchen. "Here we are," she said brightly. I stared at the table. 5 seats. A handwritten place card read, "Martha Coleman," in an elegant script that somehow felt mocking. The other card showed names I didn't recognize. Mr. Reynolds, wedding photographer; Ms. Liu, Veronica's college roommate; Dr. Sampson, hospital colleague; and Mrs. Winters, William's former neighbor. The kitchen doors swung open beside me. A waiter rushed past with a tray, the heat and noise from the kitchen momentarily washing over me. Another waiter appeared with water pitchers, nearly bumping into my chair as the doors swung again. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Coleman?" The wedding planner's smile remained fixed, but her eyes had cooled. "This is by the kitchen," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "Yes, we had to make some last-minute adjustments to accommodate the governor's security detail. I'm sure you understand." She glanced at her watch. "Excuse me, I need to check on the cake presentation." She disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone at the empty table. I sank into my chair, feeling the weight of my 67 years pressing down on me like never before. Across the vast reception hall, I could see the head table where William and Veronica sat with her parents, the Bennetts, New York royalty, according to the society pages. Table after table of Veronica's relatives spread outward in a carefully orchestrated display of social hierarchy. My table, the kitchen table, was quite literally as far from the center as possible while still technically being in the same room. 3 days ago, when William had called asking for my credit card information for a small wedding expense, I'd given it without hesitation. The small expense turned out to be $93,000 for their Maldives honeymoon, a trip William confessed he couldn't afford but felt pressured to book to impress Veronica's family. I'd transferred the money immediately, adding it to the $156,000 I'd already contributed to this wedding without anyone's knowledge, least of all the Bennetts, who believed their precious daughter was marrying a self-made surgeon. A waiter appeared, accidentally hitting my chair again as the kitchen doors swung open. "Sorry, ma'am," he muttered before rushing off. I watched as Veronica leaned in to whisper something to William, her diamond earrings catching the light. She glanced in my direction, her red lips curving into what might have been a smile but felt more like a smirk. William didn't look up. The photographer, apparently my table-mate, appeared first, introducing himself politely before setting down his second camera. "I'll be in and out," he explained. "Hope you don't mind." He was gone before I could respond. Slowly, my other table-mates arrived. Mrs. Winters, a kindly older woman who'd lived next door to William's first apartment, seemed as confused by her placement as I was. "Aren't you William's mother?" she asked, bewildered. "Why are you sitting all the way back here?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound self-pitying. As the evening progressed, the kitchen doors continued their metronomic swinging, servers rushing past, the clatter of dishes and barked orders from the chef providing an unwanted soundtrack to our meal. When William and Veronica took to the dance floor for their first dance, to a song I'd never heard, I watched my son's face, searching for the boy I'd raised. I remembered how he'd looked at 5, gap-toothed and determined as he tied his shoes for the first time. At 12, proudly showing me his science fair ribbon. At 18, tearfully hugging me goodbye before heading to college. At 26, accepting his medical school diploma, searching the crowd for my face. When had he stopped seeing me? The answer came in a flash of memory. The first time he'd brought Veronica home to Savannah. The way she'd looked at my historic home with thinly veiled disdain, calling it quaint in that Manhattan way that meant worthless. How she'd questioned William within my hearing about why he'd settled for a small-town practice when he could be making real money in New York. Before I continue, I want to tell you something important. If you want to hear more stories like this one, without ads, delivered straight to your phone even without internet, just check out the pinned comment. As I watched them dance now, crystal glasses tinkling from the surrounding tables, I realized with crushing clarity that the kitchen table wasn't a mistake or an oversight. It was a message. In Veronica's wedding, in Veronica's world, in the life my son had chosen, I belonged with the help, out of sight, convenient only for what I could provide. What would happen, I wondered, as the kitchen doors swung open again, if I stopped providing it? The wedding reception dragged on like a Tennessee summer. I watched from my kitchen table exile as Veronica's father delivered a toast about new American royalty that made several guests shift uncomfortably in their chivalry chairs. He spoke of William as though appraising a thoroughbred, excellent breeding potential, fine professional credentials, a worthy addition to the Bennett bloodline. Not once did he mention me, the woman who had worked 2 jobs after my husband's heart attack when William was 11, who had preserved his college fund by eating ramen noodles for a year, who had read medical textbooks alongside him at the kitchen table, our actual kitchen table, to help him study for his exams. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Winters patted my hand. "You've hardly touched your salmon." I forced a smile, just taking it all in. What I was taking in was the gradual revelation that my son had become a stranger. Even from across the room, I could see how he mirrored Veronica's mannerisms now. The dismissive hand-wave to servers, the practiced laugh that never reached his eyes, the way he scanned the room constantly, as if searching for more important people to acknowledge. Dr. Sampson, the hospital colleague assigned to my table, returned from the bar with another scotch. "Quite the production, isn't it?" he said, loosening his bow tie. "Nothing like William's first wedding." I snapped to attention. "You were at his wedding to Rachel." "Of course! Small garden ceremony, just 30 guests. William grilled burgers afterward, said it was a family tradition." My throat tightened. It was indeed our tradition. My late husband Charles had grilled for every family milestone, claiming that no celebration is complete without the smell of charcoal. After Rachel left him for her yoga instructor, William had changed, thrown himself into his practice, moved to a showier apartment, started appearing in the society pages. Then came Veronica, with her old money and older pretensions. "I need some air," I murmured, rising from the table. Outside on the terrace, the Atlantic stretched dark and infinite. The cool May breeze carried the scent of roses and salt water, momentarily washing away the kitchen smells that had permeated my hair and dress. "Mother!" William's voice startled me. "I've been looking for you." I turned to face my son, so handsome in his tuxedo, so eerily polished. "Have you?" "I've been rather hard to miss at the kitchen table." A flash of something, guilt, irritation, crossed his face. The seating arrangements were Veronica's department. I'm sure it wasn't intentional. Like not inviting any of my friends was unintentional? Like scheduling the rehearsal dinner during my book club's award ceremony was unintentional? William's jaw tightened. "You're making a scene." "There's no one here to witness it," I said, gesturing to the empty terrace. "Much like there's no one at this entire wedding who remembers you as a child, or cared for you when you had chicken pox, or knows that you sleep with your socks on even in summer." "Mother, please. Today is supposed to be perfect." "Yes, I know." I smoothed my dress again, a nervous habit from childhood. "Congratulations, William. Veronica is certainly remarkable." He didn't catch the hesitation in my voice. Instead, he glanced at his watch, a Patek Philippe I'd never seen before. "Actually, I needed to speak with you about the honeymoon payment. There was an issue with the resort. They're asking for the final installment tonight instead of next week." And there it was. The real reason he'd sought me out. "How much?" I asked quietly. "Just the final 30,000. I'd handle it myself, but with the wedding costs?" He trailed off, looking not at me, but through me, toward the glittering reception inside. Behind him, through the terrace doors, I could see Veronica holding court among her bridesmaids, all size 0 in identical champagne-colored dresses that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She caught my eye and whispered something that made the others giggle behind manicured hands. In that moment, I saw my future with perfect clarity. I would become the ATM mother-in-law, useful only for financial emergencies and occasional holiday appearances, where I'd be seated by the kitchen or the bathroom, or perhaps next time in the actual servants' quarters. "William," I said carefully, "do the Bennetts know I'm paying for your honeymoon?" His expression answered before his words did. "We agreed that was private, like we agreed the down payment on your condo was private, and the country club membership was private." I stepped closer. "Tell me, does Veronica know about your student loans, the ones I'm still helping you pay off?" His face flushed. "That's different. That was an investment in my future." "And what is this?" I gestured toward the reception. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're mortgaging your soul for admission to a world that will never truly accept you. Not the real you. The real me?" He laughed, a brittle sound nothing like his father's warm chuckle. "The real me isn't the small-town doctor son of a literature professor, Mother. I've outgrown Savannah. Have you outgrown decency too?" The words escaped before I could temper them. Because the William I raised would never have seated his mother by the kitchen doors while strangers took the places of honor. Something flashed in his eyes, a momentary crack in the veneer. For a second, I glimpsed my actual son, the one who cried at Old Yeller and brought me wildflowers on random Tuesdays. Then Veronica's voice cut through the night air. "William, Daddy's looking for you. The photographer wants the family portraits." She appeared at the terrace doors, her white gown luminous in the moonlight. Her eyes flickered over me dismissively. "Oh, Martha, I hope you're enjoying the celebration." "Immensely," I replied, my southern manners kicking in automatically. "Especially my prime viewing spot for the kitchen choreography." Veronica's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. "We had to make some last-minute adjustments. I'm sure a practical woman like yourself understands. Now, William?" My son straightened his shoulders and nodded. "Coming, darling." "To me," he added in a lower voice, "I'll text you the account details." They left me standing alone on the terrace, the weight of 3 decades of motherhood pressing down on me like an anvil. From inside came the announcement for the father-daughter dance. I couldn't bear to watch. Instead, I stared out at the darkness of the Atlantic, thinking about the antique writing desk in my study back home. The one Veronica had called shabby during her only visit to Savannah. The one with the hidden compartment containing my great-grandfather's legacy, documentation of first editions and manuscripts worth millions, collected over a lifetime of scholarship and preserved through 2 world wars and a depression. I'd never told William about the collection. Had planned to surprise him someday when he found the right path, the right partner, the right reasons. I thought of those treasures now, imagining Veronica's reaction if she knew her shabby mother-in-law was sitting on a fortune that would make even the Bennetts take notice. But as the gentle crash of waves punctuated the night, I realized some treasures weren't meant to be shared until they could be properly valued. And right now, neither William nor his bride seemed capable of valuing anything beyond its social currency. My phone buzzed with William's text, the account details for the honeymoon payment. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the banking app icon. Behind me, the reception continued, a monument to excess and appearances. Ahead of me stretched the decision that would define my relationship with my son for years to come. With steady hands, I put the phone back in my purse without replying. The hotel room felt cavernous at midnight. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, still in my navy dress, staring at the phone in my hand. 3 missed calls from William. 5 text messages, each more urgent than the last. Need to confirm payment tonight. Resort needs confirmation by midnight. Mother, please respond. This is important. Are you trying to embarrass me? The last one stung like a physical slap. I, who had mortgaged my home to put him through medical school, who had driven 14 hours straight when he failed his first major exam and needed a shoulder to cry on, who had nursed his broken heart after Rachel, I was somehow the one capable of embarrassing him. Outside my window, Newport's historic mansions dotted the coastline like ghost ships, their lights twinkling against the velvet black of night. I'd always wanted to visit these grand old houses, to walk their historic halls and imagine the lives lived within their walls. How ironic that I'd finally made it here for this, to be hidden away by the kitchen at my only child's wedding. My phone buzzed again. William's face appeared on the screen. I answered before I could talk myself out of it. It's past midnight, I said softly. Where have you been? His voice was tight, controlled fury vibrating beneath the surface. The resort manager has been waiting for confirmation. Veronica's father nearly offered to pay when he overheard us discussing it. Did you let him? A sharp intake of breath. Of course not. I told him it was handled. But it isn't handled, is it, William? I rose from the bed and moved to the window, watching a distant lighthouse beam sweep across the darkness. Because you assumed I would pay without question, as I always have. Mother, we discussed this. You agreed to help with the honeymoon as your wedding gift. I agreed to help with the honeymoon. Not a 3-week extravaganza at $93,000 that you didn't bother to consult me about. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. And I certainly never agreed to be treated like an inconvenient relative at your wedding. Silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted to the placating tone he used with difficult patience. The seating was unfortunate, I admit. Veronica has apologized for the oversight. Has she? To whom? Because she certainly hasn't apologized to me. Another pause. She feels terrible about it. The lie hung in the air, so transparent it was almost laughable. I thought of Veronica's smirk when she'd glanced at my table, the deliberate way she'd maneuvered me out of family photos, the whispered comments to her bridesmaids. William, I said quietly, do you remember when you were 16 and you wanted those expensive sneakers everyone had? The ones that cost nearly $200? Mother, this isn't the time for... Your father and I couldn't afford them, but instead of telling you that, we said you had to earn them. You spent that entire summer mowing lawns and washing cars until you had enough. What does this have to do with anything? You were so proud of those shoes. You kept them spotless, treasured them because you knew exactly what they cost you. I took a deep breath. I think somewhere along the way you've forgotten the value of things that come too easily. This is about money? His voice rose. I'm a successful surgeon. I'll pay you back every cent once my practice expands. No, William, this isn't about money. It's about respect. It's about the fact that you allowed your bride to seat your mother, your only living parent, by the kitchen doors while people who have known you for minutes occupied places of honor. He started to interrupt, but I continued, my voice growing stronger. It's about watching you transform into someone I don't recognize to impress people who measure worth by zip codes and club memberships. It's about you being ashamed of where you came from, of me, when everything I've ever done has been to give you opportunities. That's not fair, he protested, but the conviction had drained from his voice. What's not fair is expecting me to finance a lifestyle that explicitly excludes me. I straightened my shoulders, feeling a strange lightness spreading through me. The honeymoon payment won't be coming, William. Not tonight, not tomorrow. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. You can't be serious. His voice had dropped to a whisper. We leave tomorrow afternoon. Everything is arranged. Then I suggest you have an honest conversation with your wife about your finances. Or perhaps the Bennetts would be delighted to cover it, given their apparent wealth. Mother, please. For the first time, real panic edged into his voice. Veronica will be devastated. Her friends have been following the planning for months. The resort is exclusive. We'll never get those dates again. I'm sorry, William. Truly I am. But this is a moment of clarity for me, and I hope someday it might be for you too. I swallowed hard. I love you enough to stop enabling behavior that's changing you into someone you were never meant to be. If you do this, he said, his voice hardening, don't expect to be welcome in our lives. The threat should have devastated me. Instead, it confirmed what I already knew. In his current state, my son's love was conditional, based on what I could provide rather than who I was. That would break my heart, I said truthfully. But continuing as we have would break something even more fundamental. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I removed my dress and hung it carefully in the closet, changed into my nightgown, and slipped between the hotel's luxurious sheets. For the first time since arriving in Newport, I felt like myself again. Not William's ATM, not the embarrassing Southern mother to be hidden away, but Martha Coleman, literature professor, widow of Charles Coleman, guardian of a literary legacy, and a woman who had finally found her limit. My phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand. Text messages, then emails, then voicemails. First from William, then surprisingly from Veronica herself. I turned the phone face down without reading or listening to any of them. Tomorrow would bring consequences, anger, perhaps permanent damage to my relationship with my only child. The thought brought tears to my eyes, but not regret to my heart. Sometimes love meant standing firm when it would be easier to give in. Outside, the lighthouse beam continued its steady sweep across the darkness, a reminder that even in the blackest night, clarity could arrive in unexpected flashes of light. I closed my eyes and dreamed of home. My historic Savannah house with its secret treasures, the garden Charles had loved, the life I'd built that was worth so much more than the Bennetts and their world could ever understand. The knock came at 7:15 a.m., 3 sharp raps that cut through my fitful sleep like gunshots. I sat up, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar hotel room. The digital clock's red numbers seemed to pulse accusingly as another round of knocking began. "Martha, I know you're in there." Veronica's voice, stripped of its usual social veneer, sounded shrill through the heavy door. "We need to talk. Now." I wrapped the hotel robe around my nightgown and smoothed my silver hair as best I could before opening the door. Veronica stood in the hallway, already dressed in a cream-colored St. John knit suit, her honeymoon travel outfit no doubt. Her hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, her makeup flawless despite the early hour. Only the tight line of her mouth and the flash in her eyes betrayed her fury. "May I come in?" She didn't wait for an answer, brushing past me into the room. The scent of her expensive perfume, something French and exclusive, momentarily overwhelmed the space. "Good morning, Veronica," I said, closing the door. "Congratulations again on your beautiful wedding." Her head snapped toward me, nostrils flaring slightly. "Don't play sweet southern matron with me. William told me what you're doing." I moved to the window and opened the curtains, letting the morning light flood the room. Outside, the Newport coastline glittered in the early sun, the ocean a shade of blue Charles would have called heartbreaking. "And what exactly am I doing?" I asked, turning to face my new daughter-in-law. "Withholding the honeymoon money," she spat. "Trying to ruin the most important trip of our lives because, what, you didn't like your table at the reception?" I studied her face, so beautiful, so carefully cultivated, and so utterly unaware of her own cruelty. In that moment, I felt a surprising flash of pity. The table was a symptom, Veronica, not the cause. I gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "I've been enabling behavior that isn't healthy for William or, frankly, for your marriage." "Enabling?" She laughed, a brittle sound that held no humor. "You've been acting like a typical mother-in-law, trying to control everything. William warned me you might pull something like this. The casual rewriting of history should have angered me, but instead it clarified something. What exactly has William told you about our family finances?" She tossed her head. "That you're comfortable enough. The house in Savannah is paid off. You have retirement savings." Her eyes narrowed. "And that you promised to pay for the honeymoon months ago. Did he mention that I remortgaged that house to pay for his medical school? Or that I've contributed over $150,000 to your wedding already?" I kept my voice gentle, almost conversational. Veronica's perfect composure faltered. "What are you talking about?" "The vintage champagne at the reception, the custom-made gown, the string quartet, the photographer from Paris." I ticked off items on my fingers. "William came to me privately about each one, saying he couldn't bear to disappoint you but couldn't afford these things himself." She sank slowly onto the edge of the bed, her cream suit crinkling slightly. "That's not possible. William makes an excellent salary. And the wedding was—" She stopped abruptly. "Paid for by your parents?" I finished for her. "Some of it, certainly. But not all. Not even most." Confusion clouded her features. "But he told Daddy he was handling his share. That's why Daddy respected him, because he insisted on paying his portion as a matter of pride." "William has always had pride," I agreed. "But lately, it's been writing checks his bank account can't cash." I moved to sit in the armchair across from her. "Did you know he's still paying off student loans? That he remortgaged his condo to buy your engagement ring?" She stared at me, mascara-perfect eyes wide with disbelief. "Why would he do that? If he couldn't afford these things, he should have said so. My family has more than enough." "Exactly," I said softly. "Your family has more than enough, and William felt he needed to compete on their level to prove himself worthy of you and your world. Veronica looked down at her diamond wedding band, twisting it nervously. So this is some kind of lesson? Withholding the honeymoon money to teach us budgeting? No, it's about honesty and respect. I leaned forward. Veronica, you deliberately seated me by the kitchen doors, away from every meaningful moment of my only child's wedding. She had the grace to flush. It wasn't personal. The Andersons are close family friends. Senator Mitchell is a major donor to Daddy's foundation. They needed those premium spots, more than the mother of the groom needed to see her son's first dance? To be included in family photos? I shook my head. You made a choice about my value in William's life. I'm simply responding to that message. Her flush deepened, anger replacing embarrassment. So this is revenge. This is consequence, I corrected. In my family, we believe actions reveal truth. Your actions told me exactly where I stand. Why would you expect me to fund a honeymoon for a couple who couldn't even find a place for me at their reception? Veronica stood abruptly, pacing the room. We leave in 7 hours. The seaplane transfer is non-refundable. The villa has been prepared. Our friends know our itinerary. Her voice rose with each sentence. Do you have any idea how humiliating it will be to cancel? About as humiliating as being the only mother seated by the kitchen, perhaps, I suggested mildly. She whirled to face me. What do you want? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry about the stupid table. It was thoughtless. Now will you transfer the money? The insincerity of her apology hung in the air between us. In her world, apologies were transactional, something to be offered when necessary to get what you wanted, not an expression of genuine remorse. I think, I said carefully, what I want is for my son to remember who he is, and for you to see him, the real him, not the version you fashioned to fit into your world. You don't know anything about how I see him, she snapped. I know you've never asked about his childhood, never expressed interest in the family photos I offered to share, never inquired about his father, who would have loved to see this day. I stood, tightening the belt of my robe. The William you're marrying is a fabrication, Veronica. A man crippling himself financially to maintain an illusion for your benefit. Tears of frustration filled her eyes, one escaping to leave a mascara track down her perfect cheek. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand that her son has moved up in the world. The words were meant to wound, but they fell strangely flat. Perhaps, or perhaps I'm a mother who sees her son making the same mistake his father once made. She stilled. What mistake? Believing that love should require constant proving, constant sacrifice. I walked to the hotel desk and removed something from my purse, a faded photograph I always carried. Charles nearly bankrupted us, trying to give me the life he thought I deserved. It almost destroyed our marriage until I convinced him I hadn't fallen in love with his wallet. I handed her the photo, Charles and me on our porch swing in Savannah, his arm around me, both of us laughing at some forgotten joke. Simple, real. Veronica stared at the image, something shifting in her expression. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed uncertainty beneath her polished exterior. William loves you, I said gently. But the question is whether you love William, the actual man, not the surgeon with the country club membership and the Manhattan connections. Because that man is drowning trying to be someone he's not. She handed the photo back without comment, her face once again composed into unreadable perfection. I'll tell William we spoke. I assume you're still refusing to transfer the funds? I nodded. I am. Then I suppose we're done here. She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. Without turning, she added, for what it's worth, the table wasn't my idea. It was my mother's. She said it would help William cut ties with his provincial past. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving me alone with the morning light and the weight of words unspoken. The Newport Hotel restaurant overlooked the harbor, sailboat masts swaying gently in the morning breeze. I sipped my tea and picked at a blueberry muffin, watching wealthy vacationers stroll along the docks. My flight back to Savannah wasn't until late afternoon, leaving me hours to contemplate the wreckage of the past 24 hours. I hadn't heard from William since Veronica's visit. The silence felt both ominous and inevitable. Mrs. Coleman? I looked up to find Robert Bennett, Veronica's father, standing beside my table. In his tailored navy blazer with gold buttons and crisp white slacks, he embodied old East Coast money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted its privilege. Mr. Bennett, I acknowledged, automatically straightening my posture. Good morning. May I join you? Without waiting for my response, he signaled a waiter. Coffee black, and whatever the lady would like. Just a refill on my tea, thank you. I studied Veronica's father as he settled into the chair across from me. His silver hair was expertly cut, his tanned face relatively unlined for a man in his mid-60s. Only his eyes, shrewd and assessing, betrayed the hard calculation behind his country club persona. Beautiful day, he remarked, gazing out at the water. Newport in spring, nothing quite like it. It's lovely, I agreed, wondering if he'd come to persuade or threaten me about the honeymoon money. The waiter returned with our drinks. Robert waited until he'd gone before leaning forward slightly. I understand there's been some confusion about the honeymoon arrangements. Direct and unapologetic, I could appreciate that at least. No confusion, Mr. Bennett. Simply a change of plans on my part. He nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something. You know, when William first approached me about marrying my daughter, I had him thoroughly investigated. The statement, dropped so casually between sips of coffee, shouldn't have surprised me. Of course the Bennetts would investigate potential additions to their family tree. Standard procedure in our circles, he continued, noting my expression. Assets, liabilities, family connections, potential scandals. We'd like to know what we're getting into. And what did your investigation reveal about my son? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. A promising surgeon with mounting debt. A man living well beyond his means to impress my daughter. Robert's gaze was unflinching. And a history of allowing his mother to bail him out financially while keeping her at arm's length socially. The accuracy of his assessment stung. You make him sound calculating, not calculating. Desperate. Robert set down his coffee cup. Desperate to belong in a world that demands certain appearances, certain connections. His eyes met mine directly. A world my wife and daughter navigate ruthlessly, I'm afraid. The frank admission caught me off guard. Yet you allowed the marriage to proceed. I did. He glanced out at the harbor again. Because beneath the designer suits and the social climbing, I saw something in William that reminded me of myself 40 years ago. A young man in love, not just with a woman, but with the promise of a certain life. I studied Robert Bennett with new interest. His casual reference to his own social climbing suggested depths beyond the polished exterior. What was your background, Mr. Bennett? Before you became... I gestured vaguely at his perfect attire, the undeniable aura of privilege he projected. A faint smile touched his lips. Coal miner's son from western Pennsylvania. Scholarship to Princeton. Married Elizabeth, whose family owned half of Hartford but had more ancestry than actual cash flow. He shrugged. I built the fortune. She provided the pedigree. A common arrangement in our world, though we pretend otherwise. This revelation shifted something in my perception of the Bennetts. And now you've built an empire. A profitable one. He nodded. But empires have costs, Mrs. Coleman. His expression grew somber. My wife and daughter compete in a social arena where appearance is everything and kindness is often viewed as weakness. It's a world I enabled, but have come to find increasingly hollow. The honesty in his voice seemed genuine, surprising me again. Why are you telling me this? Robert sighed, suddenly looking older. Because I recognize the look on your face at the reception. A parent watching their child make compromising choices for the wrong reasons. He leaned forward. When I learned William had been asking you to finance aspects of this wedding while telling us he was handling everything himself, I knew exactly what was happening. And what was that? He was mortgaging his integrity to buy entry into our world. Robert's voice softened, just as I once did. I set down my teacup, struck by the unexpected alliance forming across the table. Then you understand why I couldn't continue enabling it? I do. He nodded. Though Veronica and Elizabeth are displeased, to put it mildly, the honeymoon has been cancelled. William is facing some uncomfortable questions about his finances, and my wife is suggesting we reconsider certain wedding gifts. The petty vindictiveness didn't surprise me. I'm sorry for the disruption, but not for the decision. Nor should you be. Robert reached into his jacket and removed an envelope, placing it on the table between us. William should have been honest with us from the beginning. With Veronica, with you, with himself. I eyed the envelope warily. What's this? Information your son might find valuable. He pushed it toward me. about his wife's past, and about certain financial arrangements my wife insisted upon that he isn't aware of. My hand hovered over the envelope. Why would you share this with me? Robert Bennett's expression turned grave. Because contrary to what my daughter and wife believe, I haven't forgotten where I came from or what actually matters. He stood, adjusting his blazer with practiced ease. And because I recognize in you someone who values truth over appearances, a rare quality in our circles. He laid several bills on the table, despite the fact that the meal would certainly be charged to his room. One more thing, Mrs. Coleman. That historic home of yours in Savannah, William mentioned it was built by a noted academic in the 1890s. The apparent non sequitur confused me. Yes, my great-grandfather, Edward Coleman. He was a literature professor and collector. Robert's eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect. I thought so. The Coleman collection is quite legendary in certain circles. My breath caught. Very few people knew about my great-grandfather's literary treasures. You know about the collection? I sit on the board of the Morgan Library. He smiled faintly. When William described your quaint family home, I wondered if it might be that Coleman residence, the one rumored to contain first editions of Whitman, Thoreau, and Melville, among others. For the first time since arriving in Newport, I felt the ground steady beneath me. William has no idea, does he, about the value of what you recognized? None. Robert's smile held a hint of satisfaction. Nor does my daughter, who I believe referred to your home as shabby provincial after her visit. She did. I couldn't help returning his smile, rather repeatedly. Well, he straightened his already perfect posture. Perhaps there are lessons about value still to be learned by both of them. With a slight nod, he added, Safe travels back to Savannah, Mrs. Coleman. I suspect we'll be speaking again. As he walked away, I opened the envelope he'd left. Inside were bank statements showing a prenuptial agreement that heavily favored Veronica, along with documentation of a secret trust fund Elizabeth Bennet had established that would trigger only if William achieved certain career and social milestones. They had been assessing my son's value just as coldly as he had been inflating his worth to impress them. I refolded the papers, a curious calm settling over me. The morning light streamed through the restaurant windows, illuminating the harbor where ships had once carried valuable cargo to and from distant shores. How fitting that here in Newport, a different kind of exchange had just occurred. Truth traded for truth, with my son's future happiness as the prize. The waiter refreshed my tea. Will there be anything else, ma'am? No, thank you. I gazed out at the glittering water. I have everything I need. I decided to drive back to Savannah rather than fly. 14 hours on the open road seemed preferable to being trapped in a metal tube with my thoughts. The rental car company provided a sensible sedan. Nothing flashy, just reliable transportation that reminded me of myself. 3 hours into my journey south, somewhere in New Jersey, my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. William's name flashed on the dashboard screen. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. Hello, William. Silence stretched for several seconds. Then, where are you? On the road. I decided to drive home. Another pause. We didn't get to say goodbye. The understated accusation in his tone made me grip the steering wheel tighter. You've been rather busy, I imagine. Busy dealing with the catastrophe you created. His voice hardened. Do you have any idea what you've done? I signaled and moved into the passing lane, giving myself time to formulate a response. I made a difficult decision that I believe was necessary. Necessary? He gave a harsh laugh. Veronica's friends have been texting her all day. Her sister posted about the amazing villa online yesterday. Now everyone knows we're not going. She's humiliated. I'm sorry for her discomfort, I said carefully. But perhaps this is an opportunity for honesty about your financial situation. That's rich coming from you. The venom in his voice took me aback. What do you mean? I met with Robert Bennet this morning. He had quite a lot to say about the Coleman family. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected Robert to speak with William so soon. Did he? The Coleman collection. William's voice dripped with accusation. First editions worth millions. Manuscripts museums would kill for. All sitting in that modest house you've been living in while I worked myself to the bone to build a career. I took the next exit, pulling into a rest stop parking lot. This wasn't a conversation to have while driving. William, I never hid anything from you. You simply never asked. Because you presented yourself as this humble teacher who sacrificed everything for me. His voice rose. All those guilt trips about remortgaging the house for my education, when the house contains enough valuable books to buy a hospital. I turned off the engine, watching raindrops begin to speckle the windshield. The collection was never meant to be sold. It's a legacy, a trust. Your great-great-grandfather spent his life building it. A legacy you never bothered to share with me. The hurt beneath his anger was finally visible. Your own son. I was waiting for the right time, I said softly, for you to show interest in your family history beyond what it could buy you. That's not fair, isn't it? I watched the rain fall harder, blurring the world outside. William, when was the last time you asked about my life? About your father's research? About anything related to our family that wasn't connected to your immediate needs? His silence was answer enough. I always planned to share the collection with you, I continued gently. But over the years, you made it increasingly clear that Savannah, our home, our history, they were embarrassments to be overcome, not treasures to be preserved. So this was some kind of test? Watching me struggle financially when you were sitting on a fortune? No, William. This was me hoping my son would eventually remember what actually matters. I sighed, the sound filling the quiet car. The same hope Robert Bennett apparently holds for his daughter. Robert, William's voice turned bitter. He showed me the prenup. Did you know about that too? I only learned of it this morning. I hesitated. William, why did you lie to the Bennetts about paying for the wedding yourself? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. When he finally answered, his voice had lost its edge, sounding suddenly young and vulnerable. Because Robert Bennett built his empire from nothing. He came from coal miners and made himself into a legend. I could hear him swallow. How could I admit that I needed my mother's help to afford the life his daughter expected? What kind of man would that make me in his eyes? The irony was so profound, it almost made me laugh. The kind of man he was, William. The kind of man who understands that worth isn't measured by the size of your bank account. Rain drummed on the roof of the car, creating a cocoon of white noise around our difficult truths. Veronica's devastated about the honeymoon, he said finally. She thinks you did it to punish her. And what do you think? He sighed heavily. I think I've been trying so hard to belong in her world that I forgot to question if it was a world worth belonging to. Hope fluttered in my chest, fragile as a newly emerged butterfly. And now? Now everything's a mess. Her mother is talking about re-evaluating the union. Veronica keeps vacillating between tears and fury, and I'm standing in the middle, wondering how I got here. One compromise at a time, I said gently. One little sacrifice of authenticity after another. The silence that followed felt different, thoughtful, rather than hostile. Do you remember, he said eventually, that summer we went to the Outer Banks? When I was 12? The question surprised me with its seeming randomness. Of course, your father was researching his book on coastal dialects. We rented that little blue cottage. We couldn't afford the fancy restaurants, so Dad grilled fresh fish every night on that rusty charcoal grill. William's voice softened with the memory. And you brought all those paperbacks of classic sea adventures that we read aloud on the porch. Melville, Conrad, Stevenson, I remembered, smiling despite myself. Your father did all the character voices. That was the happiest I ever remember us being. The simple statement held such weight. No pretensions, no keeping up with anyone. Just us. Rain continued to fall outside, washing the world clean. We were happy, William, not because of what we had, but because of who we were together. I don't think Veronica would understand that kind of happiness. The realization seemed to pain him. Last night, after you refused the money, do you know what she said? That we could still salvage the situation by taking Instagram photos at luxury hotels nearby and pretending we were in the Maldives. That no one would know the difference. The depth of the deception shocked me. And how did you respond? I said I was tired of pretending. His voice cracked slightly. I don't think she's ever heard me say no before. We sat in silence again, the rain creating a gentle percussion on the car roof. Finally, William spoke again. The honeymoon's canceled for good, not just postponed. I see. I kept my voice neutral, waiting. I told Veronica I need space to think, to figure out what's real and what's performance in my life. He sounded exhausted, but clearer somehow. I'm going to stay with my friend Marcus for a few days. He's chief resident at Boston General, lives in a tiny apartment and drives a 10-year-old Honda. The Marcus you played basketball with in medical school? Yes. I could hear the surprise in his voice that I remembered. You sent him that care package when he was studying for boards. Homemade cookies and coffee, I recalled. He sent such a lovely thank you note. He always said you were the mom he wished he'd had. William paused. I haven't seen much of him lately. Veronica thought he was too ordinary. The word hung in the air, its judgment now turned inside out. Well, I said carefully, ordinary has its virtues. Yes. A deep breath. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need the absolute truth. Always. All those times you helped me financially, the tuition, the condo down payment, the wedding, did it hurt you? Were you sacrificing your own security? The question, so long in coming, brought tears to my eyes. No, William. The Coleman collection may be valuable, but I never touched it. I helped you from my savings, from your father's life insurance. I was careful, but I was never in danger. And the remortgage? A small one, long since paid off. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I may have emphasized it more than strictly necessary when you were making choices I thought unwise. A surprised laugh escaped him, the first genuine one I'd heard in too long. Manipulative. Strategic, I corrected, my own smile growing. A mother's prerogative. The rain began to ease, sunshine breaking through in dappled patches. I don't know what happens next, William admitted. With Veronica, with the Bennetts, with any of it. You don't have to know today, I assured him. Just promise me one thing. What's that? That whatever you decide, it will be the real William Coleman making the choice, not the man you thought you needed to be for Veronica or her world. I'll try. He sounded both lost and found. A paradox I understood completely. Drive safely, Mom, and thank you for not giving up on me. After we hung up, I sat watching the rain clear completely, a rainbow forming over the highway ahead. The road to Savannah stretched long before me, but for the first time since arriving in Newport, the journey felt right. I started the engine again, merging back onto the highway that would take me home. Whatever happened next with William and Veronica, a truth had been spoken that couldn't be unheard. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance we can offer our children isn't money or treasures, but the courage to live authentically. And sometimes the most loving gift a mother can give is the willingness to be the villain in her child's story, at least until they're ready to rewrite the narrative themselves. I arrived home as dawn broke over Savannah, the city still peaceful in its early morning slumber. My house, a stately Victorian on a moss-draped street in the historic district, welcomed me with familiar creaks and sighs as I unlocked the door. After the opulence of Newport and the emotional tumult of the past few days, its well-worn comfort felt like a physical embrace. I dropped my bags in the foyer and moved through the rooms, running my fingers along bookshelves, touching the spines of volumes that had witnessed generations of Coleman life. In my study, behind a false panel in the antique writing desk, the one Veronica had dismissed as shabby, lay the heart of the Coleman collection. First editions of Thoreau, Emerson, and Whitman, original manuscripts from Melville and Hawthorne, correspondence between literary giants of the 19th century, treasures beyond price, not because of their market value, but because of the passion and dedication they represented. My great-grandfather had built this collection volume by volume, sacrificing comfort and convenience for the love of literature and ideas. It was never meant to be sold or leveraged, only preserved, appreciated, and eventually passed on to someone who would honor its legacy. I had always assumed that someone would be William. The morning light streamed through the windows as I made tea in my kitchen, a modern renovation Charles had insisted on before he died, knowing how I loved to cook. As the kettle whistled, my phone rang. Not William this time, but a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Coleman? This is Vanessa Bennett. I nearly dropped my mug. Veronica's sister? Yes. Her voice was lower than Veronica's, less practiced in its cadence. I hope you don't mind my calling. Father gave me your number. I carried my tea to the porch swing, Charles's favorite spot for Sunday morning contemplation. Not at all. What can I do for you, Vanessa? I wanted to apologize. The directness surprised me, for my family's behavior at the wedding, especially the seating arrangement. It was cruel and deliberate, and I should have said something. I watched a cardinal land on the feeder hanging from my oak tree, its red plumage brilliant against the green leaves. You weren't responsible for the seating chart. No, but I saw what was happening and stayed silent. Regret colored her voice. My mother and Veronica can be, well, there's a reason I live in Seattle and visit as infrequently as possible. This candid assessment from within the Bennett family circle intrigued me. I appreciate your call, Vanessa, but I'm curious about its timing. She sighed, the sound carrying clearly across the miles. Father told me what happened with the honeymoon, and about your conversation. He said you were a woman of substance who deserved better than we showed her. Robert Bennett continued to surprise me. That was generous of him. Father has always been the only one of us with both money and perspective. Vanessa's tone held rueful affection. The rest of us tend to have one or the other, but rarely both. I smiled despite myself. And which category do you fall into? Perspective, definitely. I teach middle school in a public school district. Mother nearly had apoplexy when I chose education over finance. The image of Elizabeth Bennett's horror at her daughter becoming a mere teacher almost made me laugh. It's honorable work. It's real work, Vanessa countered, which is more than I can say for much of what occupies my mother and sister's time. She paused. William called me last night. My heart skipped. Did he? He asked about Marcus Reynolds, whether I remembered him from college. Vanessa's voice softened. Marcus was the kindest person in William's medical school friend group, the one who organized study sessions and made sure everyone ate during finals week. Veronica always referred to him as the charity case, because he was on scholarship. The casual cruelty felt familiar. William mentioned he might stay with Marcus for a while. He is. They're having breakfast together, as we speak. A note of hope entered Vanessa's voice. William sounded different, more like the person I remember from before he and Veronica became serious. He asked me about my students, my life in Seattle. Real questions, not just social niceties. I closed my eyes, feeling the gentle rock of the porch swing. That sounds like my son. Mrs. Coleman. Martha, please. Martha. She seemed to gather her thoughts. I want you to know that what you did, refusing to finance that ridiculous honeymoon, it was the right thing. Painful, but right. For years I've watched Veronica and my mother collect people like accessories, valuing them only for what they add to the Bennett image. And William was a handsome, accomplished accessory, I concluded. Exactly. They were molding him into their version of the perfect son-in-law, and he was letting it happen. Genuine concern filled her voice. I almost didn't come to the wedding because I couldn't bear to watch it. Then when I saw how they treated you, it was illuminating, I acknowledged. It was unconscionable. Vanessa's tone turned resolute, which is why I've decided to stay in Newport for a few more days. Father and I are having dinner with William tomorrow evening. Mother and Veronica are beside themselves that we would betray family loyalty this way. The unexpected alliance between Vanessa, Robert, and potentially William sent a surge of hope through me. Families are complicated, especially when they're built on appearances rather than love. She paused. Father mentioned your collection, the books and manuscripts. He did his research, I said, surprised again by Robert Bennett's thoroughness. He respects what it represents. Multi-generational commitment to something meaningful. Her voice grew quieter. I think he sees in you the road not taken, the values he compromised to build his empire. The insight seemed profound for someone I'd barely met. Your father is a more complex man than he appears. Most of us are, Vanessa replied, which is why I'm cautiously optimistic about William. Beneath all that Newport polish, I caught glimpses of someone thoughtful, someone who might still remember what matters. We talked for a few more minutes, exchanging contact information and tentative plans to stay in touch. After we hung up, I remained on the porch swing, watching morning light play through the Spanish moss that draped my oak trees like delicate lace. 3 days ago, I had felt utterly alone at my son's wedding, relegated to the kitchen table, invisible except when needed for financial support. Now, somehow, unexpected allies had emerged from the very family I'd viewed as the enemy. My phone pinged with a text message. William, having breakfast with Marcus, talking about things that matter for the first time in ages. We'll call later. Simple words, but they carried a weight of hope that made my eyes sting with tears. I typed back, love you. Take all the time you need. The cardinal at my feeder had been joined by its mate, the two birds taking turns at the seeds I'd filled it with before leaving for Newport. They worked in perfect harmony, each allowing the other space and sustenance in equal measure. My doorbell rang, interrupting my reverie. When I opened it, I found a delivery man holding an enormous arrangement of white lilies and blue hydrangeas. Martha Coleman? He confirmed, handing me the vase. Yes, thank you. I carried the flowers to my kitchen table, my actual kitchen table, where family had gathered for decades of meals, homework sessions, and late-night conversations. The card read simply, "From one who understands the value of substance over appearance. With respect and gratitude for your courage, Robert Bennett." I arranged the flowers as the morning light filled my kitchen, turning the white lilies almost translucent. My house felt alive again after the days away, not shabby or provincial as Veronica had claimed, but rich with history and meaning. The antique clock in the hallway, a wedding gift to my great-grandparents, chimed 9 times. I had classes to prepare for next week, a garden that needed attention after my absence, friends to catch up with. Life in Savannah waited to reclaim me. But first, I took a leather-bound journal from my desk drawer. Charles had given it to me on our last anniversary before his heart finally gave out. I'd been saving it for something important. On the first blank page, I began to write, my pen flowing across the cream-colored paper. Dear William, when you're ready, there are stories I want to share with you. About your great-grandfather and the treasures he collected. About your father and the man he truly was. About our family's history of choosing meaning over appearance, substance over show. There's an inheritance waiting for you that has nothing to do with money or social position. It's about who we are and what we value. It's about the courage to live truthfully in a world that often rewards the opposite. The kitchen table will always have a place for you, not as punishment or exile, but as the heart of what matters. It's where our family has broken bread, shared dreams, and healed wounds for generations. Take the time you need to find your way back to yourself. I'll be here when you're ready. With all my love, Mom. 2 weeks passed. Spring settled fully over Savannah. Jasmine scenting the air and azaleas blazing in every garden. I returned to my routine, teaching my literature classes at the college, tending my garden, meeting my book club for our monthly discussion. Life resumed its comfortable rhythm, though thoughts of William were never far from my mind. We spoke briefly every few days. Short conversations, careful ones, as if we were both relearning how to talk to each other without the weight of expectations and financial entanglements. He remained in Boston, still staying with Marcus, still figuring things out, with Veronica, who had returned to Manhattan to live with her parents while they reassessed the situation. Vanessa Bennett called occasionally, offering gentle updates on the family dynamics. Elizabeth Bennett was furious about the cancelled honeymoon, directing most of her anger at me for what she called my vindictive interference. Robert, surprisingly, had defended my actions to his wife, causing what Vanessa described as the most honest argument they've had in 20 years. I was pruning roses in my front garden when the Blacktown car pulled up to the curb. The driver emerged first, opening the rear door with practiced deference. When Veronica Bennett, or Coleman, though I wasn't certain which name she now preferred, stepped onto my sidewalk, I nearly dropped my pruning shears. She looked both the same and different. The designer outfit and perfect makeup remained, but something in her posture had shifted. Less rigid, perhaps, less certain. "Mrs. Coleman," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "May I speak with you?" I removed my gardening gloves, conscious of the dirt under my fingernails and the sweat dampening my cotton shirt. "This is unexpected, Veronica. For me as well." She glanced at my home, taking in the wraparound porch with its ceiling painted haint blue in the old Gullah tradition, the carefully preserved gingerbread trim, the mature oak trees that had witnessed over a century of Savannah history. "Your house is lovely." The admission seemed to cost her something. I nodded toward the porch. "Would you like some tea? It's rather warm out here." She followed me inside, her Louboutin heels clicking against the heart pine floors that Charles had spent a summer restoring by hand. I was acutely aware of her gaze taking in everything. The antique furniture, the built-in bookshelves laden with volumes, the subtle signs of age that no amount of care could completely erase in a house this old. "Please, sit." I gestured to the porch where I'd set out a pitcher of sweet tea that morning. "I'll just wash up quickly." When I returned with clean hands and an extra glass, Veronica was standing by the porch railing, looking out at the garden. "The colors are extraordinary," she remarked. "Did you plant all this yourself?" "Most of it. The roses were my husband's project. I've maintained them since he passed." I poured tea over ice, the glasses sweating immediately in the humid air. "What brings you to Savannah, Veronica? I assumed you'd be in Manhattan with your family." She accepted the glass but didn't drink, instead tracing a finger through the condensation. William asked for an annulment. The news landed like a stone in still water. "I see." He said our marriage was built on mutual deception, that we were in love with images, not people. Her voice remained surprisingly steady. He said he needed to find himself again before he could consider being with anyone. I took a careful sip of tea, measuring my response. "And how do you feel about that?" "Angry, humiliated, relieved." She finally met my eyes directly. "Confused about which emotion is the most honest." The self-awareness surprised me. "That sounds complicated." "It is." She set down her glass and reached for the handbag she'd placed on the porch swing, a Hermes Birkin that probably cost more than a semester of college tuition. From it, she withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I came to return this. It belongs with your family." Puzzled, I unwrapped the tissue to find a small, leather-bound volume of Thoreau's Walden. Not just any edition, the rare first printing that had been part of the Coleman collection. My breath caught. "Where did you get this?" I asked, running my fingers over the delicate binding. "William gave it to me as a wedding gift." She watched my face carefully. "He said it was a family heirloom that had shaped the Coleman philosophy for generations." I opened the cover, seeing the familiar inscription in my great-grandfather's careful hand. "In wildness is the preservation of the world, and in simplicity the salvation of the soul." "Did you read it?" I asked softly. "I tried." A hint of genuine regret colored her voice. "It seemed important to William, but I couldn't understand why anyone would choose to live in the woods when they could have the comforts of civilization." She smoothed her linen dress. "I pretended to love it, of course. Added it to our bookshelf where his colleagues would notice it during dinner parties. The casual admission of such calculated deception should have angered me. Instead, I found myself pitying this young woman, who measured life's value in impressions made rather than connections formed. "Why return it now?" I asked. "Because I understand its value now, if not its message." She looked around the porch, taking in the comfortable, worn furniture, the ceiling fan turning lazily overhead, the garden beyond. "This, all of this, it's what William was trying to make me see. A life built on substance rather than show." I placed the book carefully on the small table between us. "And what do you see, Veronica?" She straightened, some of her practiced polish returning. "I see that I was cruel to you at the wedding, that I allowed my mother's snobbery to influence my treatment of someone who deserved respect." Her gaze met mine directly. "I see that I've spent my entire life trying to win approval from people who measure worth by the wrong standards." "That's quite an insight," I observed. "Don't misunderstand me, Mrs. Coleman. I'm not having some grand epiphany about simplicity and abandoning my lifestyle." A hint of her former sharpness returned. "I like beautiful things. I enjoy moving in certain circles. I'm not about to start shopping at Target or driving a Honda. I wouldn't expect you to. But," she continued, her voice softening again, "I recognize that I crossed a line with you, that my behavior reflected poorly on me, not on you. And I'm sorry." The apology hung between us, surprisingly genuine. I nodded, accepting it without further comment. "William also asked me to give you this." She reached into her bag again, producing an envelope. "He said he wasn't ready to deliver it in person yet, but that it was important you receive it." I took the envelope, feeling its weight, something more than just a letter inside. "Thank you." Veronica stood, smoothing her dress again in a gesture I now recognized as self-soothing rather than vanity. "I should go. My flight back to New York leaves in 2 hours. You came all this way just to return a book and deliver a letter?" She smiled faintly. "And to see the famous Coleman house for myself, to understand what William was trying to explain to me about heritage and value." She glanced around once more. "It is beautiful in its way. Not what I would choose, but I can see why it matters to your family." I walked her to the door, this young woman who had seated me by the kitchen at her wedding and was now standing in my foyer with something like respect in her eyes. "What will you do now?" I asked as we reached the front steps. She considered the question seriously. "Reassess, I think. Father has suggested I take a more active role in the foundation work, something beyond just lending my name to Gallus." She slipped on designer sunglasses, shielding her eyes. "William said something that stuck with me, that I'd never known the satisfaction of earning anything myself." "That sounds like my son," I said softly. "The real one." "Yes, the one I glimpsed occasionally but never fully appreciated. She extended her hand formally. "Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Coleman. I hope William finds what he's looking for." I shook her hand, noting the perfect manicure, the diamond wedding band she still wore. "So do I, Veronica, and I hope the same for you." After her car pulled away, I returned to the porch with William's envelope. Inside, I found a letter and a small velvet pouch. The letter was brief. "Mom, I found this in Dad's old fishing tackle box when I was looking for something in the attic last Christmas. I think he meant it for you, but never had the chance to give it. It seems right that you should have it now. I'm not ready to come home yet, but I'm finding my way back to myself. Marcus reminds me daily of who I used to be. Vanessa Bennett has been surprisingly helpful too. Turns out she's nothing like her sister or mother. The annulment papers are filed. Veronica didn't fight it. I think, in her way, she's trying to find herself too. I miss you. I miss Dad. I miss who we were before I got lost, trying to be someone else. Love, William." The velvet pouch contained a small silver compass, clearly antique, with an inscription on the back, "For Martha, who always helps me find my way home. Love, Charles." I held the compass in my palm, feeling its weight, physical and emotional. Charles must have purchased it before his final heart attack, tucked it away for some special occasion that never came. Yet somehow, now, it had found its way to me through our son. A son who was finding his own way back to true north after years of drifting toward false horizons. I returned to my garden, the compass in my pocket, and continued pruning the roses Charles had planted. Each snip of the shears felt like an act of faith, cutting away what was spent and unnecessary to make room for new growth. Much like what William was doing with his life, much like what I had done by refusing to fund that honeymoon. Sometimes the greatest acts of love require the sharpest cuts, and sometimes, I thought as I worked among the roses my husband had loved, the most important tables in our lives aren't the ones at grand receptions, but the ones where we gather with those who truly see us, kitchen tables and all. Summer passed into autumn, the sweltering Savannah heat giving way to golden days and crisp evenings. My classes at the college kept me busy. A new generation of students discovering Thoreau and Emerson, asking fresh questions about old texts, reminding me why I'd chosen teaching as my life's work. William and I spoke regularly now, real conversations, not the stilted exchanges of recent years. He remained in Boston, having taken a position at a community hospital rather than the prestigious private practice he'd been pursuing. "Less money, more medicine," he explained. "More people who actually need help, rather than vanity procedures." The annulment was finalized in August, a quiet legal ending to a marriage that had begun with such outsized pomp. Veronica returned to Manhattan, and, according to Vanessa, who had become an unexpected friend,